a fact. Fortunately, we did not have to wait for our kernel, which we call the GNU herd, to be working, because in 1991, a college student in Finland decided, just because he was interested in kernels, that he would write a kernel. And he had it running using the traditional monolithic design, one big program that's all one connected thing and does all the jobs. He had it running, barely running, in less than a year, which was amazing. Initially, it was not free software, but in early '92, he decided to re-release it under the GNU General Public License. So it was free software then. At that point, it was possible, by fitting his kernel into the gap in the GNU system, to make a complete free system, and people did that. We didn't do that. Linus Torvalds never contacted us and said, "I have a kernel, would you like to use it?" But he did announce it elsewhere, and people who knew about his kernel thought, let's try to find all the other programs we need so that we could have a whole system we could actually run. So they looked around, and lo and behold, everything they needed was already available. What good fortune, they said. But this was no accident. The reason that all the rest of the system was already there is we'd been working on that for most of a decade, making all these components and making them work together. So in fact, what they were doing was adding Linux to the incomplete GNU system, because this kernel's name is Linux, you see. So they were adding Linux to GNU, making a system that you could call GNU plus Linux. But they didn't recognize that that's what they were doing. They thought they were starting with Linux and adding these many other components to make a system. They didn't realize that all the rest was GNU. So they called the whole thing a Linux system. And that's how the confusion got started. That's how it is that tens of millions of people are now using a variant of the GNU system, and they don't know it's a variant of the GNU system. They don't know it's a system that we've been working on for 20 years specifically for the sake of freedom to cooperate. They think the whole system is Linux, and that it was all started in 1991 by Linus Torvalds. Now, why does that matter, this confusion? Well, it hurts our egos, but that's not really an important thing. The thing that matters is that Linus Torvalds doesn't agree with our philosophy. He doesn't share our vision of living in freedom. He happens to think that non-free software is legitimate. He doesn't like the idea of making technical decisions based on social consequences. He thinks a technical decision should be made for technical reasons, to keep the technology pure. Well, I can't really speak for him. I hope I haven't made a mistake. As you can see, I don't agree with those views, but he has a right to his views, and he has a right to advocate them. What I think is unfair is when our larger work is attributed to him and to his views and becomes a platform for spreading his views instead of ours. Most of the users of the GNU system think it was developed by somebody who wanted to have fun. Well, having fun is a perfectly good motive. I have fun programming too. But the reason we have a complete free operating system is because of another motive, because of people who were determined to work as long as it took so that we could live in freedom. And the users need to know this, because they need to think about the issue of freedom, or they're likely to lose their freedom. And this is something that is much more general than the area of software. We can see in all areas of life, if you have freedom but you don't value it, you're likely to lose it. Because people will offer to take your freedom off your hands and give you in exchange something else that's attractive or convenient. Maybe they'll say they'll make you more safe, or maybe they offer you a competitive advantage. Whatever it is, or maybe just a more convenient system, all you have to do is pay some money and give up your freedom, and you will have these attractive advantages. And society is constantly faced with that kind of temptation to throw everything away. My country suffered a terrible attack in 2001 from its own leaders who took away our freedom in the name of keeping us safe from terrorism. Now, I thought that people were supposed to give up their lives to defend their freedom, not the opposite. The opposite is stupid. After people fought for freedom so hard, to throw it away just to save your life, that's cowardice. My country was founded for the sake of freedom and still talks about being the champion of freedom, but it's not so anymore, and that makes me terribly sad when I think about it. At least in India, when they tried to pass anti-terrorism laws, at least there was a fight. It still happened, but you can be proud that at least the opposition in the Indian parliament fought against it. In the U.S. Congress, almost everybody voted for it, to take away our freedom. And how we'll ever get it back, I don't know. Well, that applies to these obscure issues of freedom for users of software, just as it applies to freedom from having the police just spy on you all the time. It applies to any issue of freedom. But in the area of freedom for computer users, we face the problem that most users have never even heard of the issue. That's our first mission. If we want users to stand up for their freedom, we've got to teach them what it is, what the issue of freedom is. And here, unfortunately, most of the free software community is not participating. Most of them talk about the GNU/Linux system, calling it Linux, and presenting it only as a practical alternative, suggesting only practical advantages for it. Well, those practical advantages are part of the reason to switch to it. But if people don't talk about the ethical and political reasons, we're not teaching people to value freedom. And people who don't value freedom can easily give it up. They might switch to a free operating system for practical reasons, and the next thing you know, they're installing some non-free software on top of it because they don't know they're losing anything. And this happens quite often. There are many people who are fans of the GNU/Linux system. And they work hard to try to make the system more popular. And they think it's good when some non-free program runs on top of the system. They actually applaud the developers and say, thank you for supporting, they usually call it Linux. Say, thank you for supporting Linux because you'll help us make Linux more popular. And when they say Linux, they're really talking about a variant of the GNU system. So they are trying to support our project by making our work more popular. But that's missing the point. We didn't do this work just so it would be popular. There's a more important thing at stake here, which is our freedom. We did this work so that we and you could live in freedom. And they're willing to sacrifice the freedom to gain popularity. They're willing to endorse a non-free program and call it a good thing because it might make our system more popular. Well, when they do that, what are they saying to people? What are they teaching people? They're teaching people that non-free software is fine. It's okay. How are those people going to understand why they should stand up for freedom if we never tell them that? So, although our community is growing and our software is also doing more jobs, our community is weak in some ways because it's full of people who have never recognized this as an issue of freedom. People who are ready to choose at any given moment whatever program is most convenient for today's job, who are looking at the question in short-term ways. You find governments saying,